Hi, this is Doug from Dynamic Computing. Welcome to another episode of the ChickenHead Chronicles. Today I want to talk about the new device that's out called the pi1541. Now it is a clever little device that uses a Raspberry Pi as its brains, and then a little device called a piHat that slots right on the top. And the thing will then emulate a 1541 drive. Plug in an SD card, it'll see all your .d64 files and view them as if it was a real 1541 drive. It will also do some 1581 emulations. That's the 3.5-inch floppy for our 8-bits. And it will do USB flash drives now. With the firmware as of a couple of months ago, you can also use a flash drive, plug it in there with some files in it, and it'll read the flash drive okay. So first, let me show you a little bit about the device. This is the device itself. On the bottom here, you'll see this is just a standard Raspberry Pi. Let me take her apart here. Shouldn't be too hard. Yep, just a standard Raspberry Pi. This is version 3B+, which is the latest one I think that is out there. It'll work on anything from a 3B and beyond, but anything before that, currently it does not work with. You've got your USB connectors here, Ethernet connector, which we're not going to be using in this case, slot for an SD card. This is the connector that our piHat goes on. And this little USB port here is for power, and you have to use a 2.5 amp 5 volt USB power adapter. Anything less than that and it's not going to perform. It's not going to do what it needs to do. Make sure you get the right power adapter. These are available for about $38 to $40 on Amazon. I've seen them other places for $45 up to $55 in retail stores. So your mileage may vary on getting the Raspberry Pi. They do not come with a power cord by default. You have to buy that separate. Figure you're going to pay $10 to $12 for a power cord. Okay. Now the piHat, this is where all the magic comes in. The files for creating your own, with details for creating your own, are available online, and I will try to link to some of those. Or you can buy one pre-made, which is what I did. Now, already, there's a whole group of you out there going, oh, just save the money, make your own, make your own. Well, I could grow my own wheat and mill it and grind my own flour and make my own bread too, and save some money, or I could just go to the grocery store and buy a loaf of bread. I'm occasionally the one who just wants to buy a loaf of bread. Okay, so if you want to buy your own piHat, there are multiple sources out there, but my personal favorite, and the one I think who does one of the best jobs, is Commodore Forever. If you watch my 10-minute Amiga Retrocast video the other day, I talked about one of his power supplies that I got from my Amiga 500 and just really enjoy. He also does these piHats. He sells them right online. They're about $58. Now these are cool because they have the little LCD display. Some of them you buy pre-made do not have the LCD display, and that does come in handy, as you'll see. Some of them only have one IEC serial interface instead of two. Get the ones with two so you can daisy chain these together. And we've got all our little buttons on there, a little piezo speaker. Works really well. Now here's the little guy plugged in. You see it's got an IEC connector that just goes right into the back of my Commodore 64. That's my little SD to IEC. We're going to talk more about him in a minute. Now, when you turn this little guy on by giving it power, first thing you're going to notice is it comes up with a little image of a 1541 drive, which is cute, and then it comes up and it gives you an actual display of what you can see here. You'll use these buttons to choose your various D64 files and select where you're going to go. So for example, if I wanted to go back a directory and choose a different D64 file, I can just manipulate these little buttons to go into my various folders. There I'm in my C64 folder. There I'm going to G for Geos, choosing a 1581 image. Now by doing this, I have just told it to use that 1581 image. Now, here you're going to find my one and only complaint about this piHat from my buddy at Commodore Forever. And that is, these lights are terribly bright, these LEDs. So you go to try and read the screen and it's like looking into the sun. You're just blinded by those little LED lights. So if I can ask him one favor and swap out these LED lights for something substantially more subtle, I think that would work well. They're just too bright. The other way that we can use our device is by loading the really fantastic file browser that I talked about in my SD2IEC video. Now, there's a caveat with this, and the caveat is that it uses a proprietary version of the file browser. You have to use the one supplied to you by the pi1541. If you try to use the version that comes with the SD2IEC, it is not going to work. It is going to lock up your device and you're going to have to just reset it to get back to normal. And that is because this little Pi device does not fully emulate SD2IEC. It only has partial emulation to make it a little bit easier to browse files on here. So if I load up my file browser, you see it looks just like the regular file browser that comes with the SD2IEC, but believe me, it is totally different. Go into our folders. We're going to go into these game folders, and we're going to choose a D64 file. And there's Pac-Man. Once you've selected your particular D64 file that you want to use, just hit Q to quit, and you'll see on the Pi device, if it wasn't so glaringly bright, that it actually says Pac-Man D.64 on there. We can load up our directory. And there's our Pac-Man game, and it will load it exactly as fast as a real 1541 drive will. I will not make you suffer through it. It probably takes about 35 seconds. Okay, and I see that this is a different version of Pac-Man than the normal one. That's interesting. I've never actually played this one. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time showing you how to set this device up, because there is some configuration that is required. So we're going to stroll into the other room and take a look at my PC and look how we can set this thing up. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to this website, cbm-pi1541.firebaseapp.com, and of course, as always, I'll put the link right down there, and I'll have it in the description. What this is this is the page of the gentleman who designed the Pi1541. It has instructions for building your own, if you want to build your own from scratch, and it has most of the files required for setting up your Pi1541. You're going to need an SD card, one of the micros. Now, in my case, I'm just using a little 2 gig card because it'll store, you know, almost everything that's ever been created for the Commodore 64 on 2 gigabytes. If I need a bigger one, I'll put a bigger one in, but it's served me fine. And you'll need one of the little adapters if you want to use it in a standard size SD reader on your computer. But the first thing you're going to want to do is download the latest version of the binaries for setting up an SD card. And that's going to be right here. And we're going to save that. It's called pi1541. Now I've already got a copy there. I'll just save it. And comes through as a zip file. And once you unzip it, what it's going to have in there are all of the regular files that you need for using your 1541. It's got the kernel image, which is the latest one. It's got your config file, and it's got your 1541 folder. And what the 1541 folder has in it are the FB file browsers for Commodore 16, VIC-20, Commodore 64, Commodore 128. It's got all your file browsers right in there. Now, I have a lot more in mine. Let me show you how I laid mine out. I've got .1581 ROM in there, also a Jiffy Dose 1581 ROM. I've got a couple of these other files that are useful for setting up your device. Start.elf, fixup.dat. And then in my 1541 folder, I not only have the file browser programs, but I've got a folder called CBM, which I took from the SD2IEC device. And I keep my files separated there by the particular platform, Commodore 64, Commodore 128. Then I've got a folder with D81 files in it, and some other games folders here. But you're going to want to put those files on the SD card. And I will put a link in the description for all of this stuff. Now this file, options.txt, is very important. Let's see if we can't zoom in a little bit on there. What you're going to find in here are all of your options to set up your pi1541. I'll point out the important ones. Device ID 8. Unless you have a specific reason to change it from 8, everything is going to run better if you keep it as device 8. You can set it to 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever you want to do, but probably a good 70% of the .d64 files are looking for drive 8. Even a lot of the productivity apps I've tried. If you've got it set to anything else, just forget it. It's not going to work. Other important ones are which ROM you're using for 1581 ROM emulation. Now this does not ship, and the download does not automatically come with a 1581 ROM. That is still, a copyrighted material. There are plenty of resources online for grabbing these ROM files, but the one I'm using is called 1581-ROM.318045-02.bin. I downloaded that, put that in my SD card folder, and then told this option file to call that up. Another important one, if you're going to be using a fast loader cartridge like the Epix cartridge that I have, what you want to do is have the computer, as soon as you turn the computer on and it senses the pi1541, have the pi1541 automatically auto-mount this D64 file called fb.d64. Once you auto-mount that file, then that version of the file browser is going to recognize the Epix fast loader or whatever other fast loader you're going to use, and is going to try and use that. Full disclosure, it doesn't work very well. I'll show you why in a few minutes. There are a lot of other options on here that you can change. Those are the base ones. Some of the other ones are for changing the button layout, configuring the contrast on the screen. Quite a bit you can do there. So in a nutshell, you're going to be now downloading .d64 files or .d81 files and dropping them into hopefully some kind of organized file structure in here for your pi1541 to look at. Once you've downloaded, like I mentioned, the 1581 driver there, on this same page under SD card setup, it has links for downloading a 1541 ROM image, and you put it in the root folder of the SD card, and a link to hopefully copy over the CBM font file, which there's also a link to downloading that particular file. Put that in the root. Now, I'm a big fan of the pi1541. I think the author has done a fantastic job with the software. I think the people who have come up with new ways of making the piHat are genius, and they do a great job. I also think that you should go to the author's website and donate a couple of bucks via PayPal in support of his hard work. Absolutely. Now, here I'm going to risk being burned at the stake. If you've been on any of the Commodore forums online, on Facebook, and somebody mentions the word SD2IEC versus pi1541, okay. Generally, from what I've seen, it's people going absolutely crazy, saying, throw your SD to IECs out the window, they're garbage, pi51 is superior in every way. Okay? I've been playing with this for a fair amount of time now, and I'm here to tell you that's not necessarily so. Okay? I love the pi1541. It does a great job for what it does. Is it superior to the SD to IEC? No, not necessarily. Okay? In some ways, yes, but in most ways, not at all. Good example. The other week, I made a nice video on the SD to IEC card, okay? And I talked about this great utility called Draw Copy, DRA Copy, that will allow you to show in split screen view. Okay, here's your SD to IEC. You can go in there, you can open up any quantity of D64 files, open it here, you can open up your regular 1541 or 1571 on there. You want to copy between them? Fantastic, boom, copies between them. Regular disk utilities, they can see the SD to IEC just fine. The pi1541? You try to use draw copy, DRA copy on a 1540 or on a pi1541, it's not going to work. Just plain and simple, not going to work. Doesn't see the device. All it does is throw a green bar across the screen for all eternity. Nothing. And it's because it is trying to emulate a true 1541. Now, if you went in and you have a D or a .d64 file with DRA copy on it, and you linked that up into your pi1541, and then you launch the software, sure, it will see your disk, your virtual disk of the DRA copy 1541. And then you say, okay, now I'm going to go browse through these folders and copy this to this. Fails, doesn't let you do it, okay? SD to IEC, move around the folders all day long, no problem at all. Pi1541 fails every time, okay? So that's very, very important. If your goal is you want to take .d64 or .d81 images and make real disks out of them, not going to be as easy when you're using a pi1541. Yeah, you can kludge around, you can do it, but on the SD to IEC, takes a couple of seconds. Load up draw copy, browse whatever folder you want to on your 32 gig card. There it is, yeah, burn, flip, flop, done. But your Pi ain't gonna work, okay? So that's number one. So just as an example, this is draw copy 64. You see you've got these beautiful two different windows showing your two different devices This one happens to be device 8. That one happens to be device 9. I'm going to tell this to look at device 10. This is what I've set my SD2IEC on. I'm going to tell it to look in the directory of that. Great, I can see my SD2IEC. I'm going to go in and I'm going to look at some of these files. Here are the D81 files, English, joystick 2, and we're just going to pick any one of these files, and we're going to do Three Stooges. So what we're doing is we're looking at the folder of this D81 disk file. It's showing us all the files that are in there. Now, from here, I could hit F8 and I could copy that D81 disk images directly to my actual 1581 drive. No problem at all. Not even a second thought. Just boom, done, copied. Now watch what happens when I go up here. Device 8 is my SD, or is my pi1541. I'm going to try and read the directory of that. Wait, I can't read the directory? Nothing's working? Huh. Okay, so I'm going to go to my Pi and I'm going to tell it to maybe manually look at another folder. So I'm changing it to Commodore 64, and let's just find a nice file in here. Okay, here's a nice D64 file. I've manually changed my pi1541 to tell it to emulate an actual .d64 file. Now it's reading it. Now it works. But what I had to do was physically go down and press the buttons on the 1541 to locate the file, locate the folder, and program it and tell it which D64 file to use. I can't just go back and forth and swap between D64 files. I just can't do it. You can absolutely do it with SD2IEC. You can only do one folder at a time with the pi1541. It really reduces the usefulness of it. It takes twice as long to do everything. And if you've got a piHat with no LCD display, or you don't have it plugged into an HDMI monitor, you can't see what you're doing. You have to use the software interface, and it doesn't work in this case. That's bad. Number 2 is, yes, it will support 1581 emulation. It will not support burst mode for the 1581, the burst mode that's available on the Commodore 128. Now, that's not too bad. I figured I could live with that. My goal was to hook up the pi1541 to my Commodore 128, and then in CPM mode, I'll make some nice disks, some CPM disks, virtual disks with some files on it, you know, or some Geos disks or something like that. Great. Yeah, it works. But not only does it not support burst mode, but it slows your 1571 drives down to 1541 speeds just because it's plugged in. Literally, if you plug in your pi1541, your 1571 drives, like my two beautiful ones right here, slow down. Try to boot CPM with the pi1541 just in the drive chain, not even trying to boot from it. Booting from my 1571 takes like 4 minutes to boot. You take the Pi out, back down to your normal 30 seconds to boot. Not acceptable. I'm sure it'll be fixed, but not acceptable, because I can take my SD2IEC, I can hook it up to my Commodore 128 all day long. Whatever, just going to work perfect. All right, that's great. A third thing is that the pi1541, while it will emulate 1541 disks and it will emulate 1581 disks, doesn't care a fig about 1571 disks. Doesn't even see them. Doesn't work. It literally just doesn't work. Where in my SD2IEC, I can take a .d71 image And again, I do this a lot because I'm doing things in GEOS, I'm doing things, CPM, that kind of thing, and I'm taking D71 files and making real disks out of them. Can't do it. Doesn't see it. You probably will be able to someday. I'm sure he's going to, do a kernel update that supports it. But right now, it doesn't work. Okay? Fourth thing is performance. All right? The pi1541 is a bare minimum of 10% slower than the SD2IEC. 10%. What takes me a minute to load on my pi1541 is going to take 45 to 50 seconds to load on the SD2IEC. Not a huge difference, but it's a difference, and it is noticeable when you're loading things up. Next thing is the compatibility with fast load cartridges. I happen to use the Epix fast loader. I got it from the Futures 8-bit. They're awesome guys. Same place I got my SD2IEC. So you have to jump through a couple of hoops to get the fast loader cartridge to work. I mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, where you have to change the comment in that options field and tell it to boot to a very special .d64 file on your pi1541 in order for it to recognize the fast load cartridge. Okay, once you do that, okay, it does. It recognizes it sometimes, and it occasionally almost sort of works a little bit. About 50 or 60% of the time, doesn't work. I try to load a D64 file using this cartridge. The light comes on in the pi1541, nothing happens, never finds a file. Other times, finds it, boom, loads it right up. With 1581 images, nothing, ever, never. Doesn't even work. Don't even try it. You try to even load a directory of a 1581 with this cartridge, just doesn't work. Fails. Put in your SD2IEC, works all day long. Probably 80 to 90% success rate with this. Good example. GEOS on the 64, loading up on the pi1541 took 1 minute exactly. Loading it up on my SD2IEC took 50 seconds. Put in the fast loader cartridge, pi1541, complete failure. Wouldn't load, wouldn't even see it. On my SD2IEC, loads up in about 12 to 15 seconds. Beautiful, okay? This is not a bash of the pi1541. It is a fantastic device. It is a wonderful device. It's more expensive than the SD2IEC. Even if you build everything from scratch yourself, it's still more expensive. Great device. Its potential is unbelievable. They're going to fix the bugs. They're going to clean everything up. Everything's going to work perfect. But as of right now, I'm telling you people who keep complaining online about the SD2IEC versus the pi1541, it's not true. You sit down side by side with both of them and you'll see what I'm talking about. The SD2IEC is a more developed product. It's a faster product. It works with more stuff. So you guys just need to stop. Just stop with the bickering about whether the pi1541 is better. All right? They're both fantastic. Love them both, but you need to stop. So what would my recommendation be? If you've got a Raspberry Pi 3 or above sitting around not doing anything, do yourself a favor. Go ahead. Get yourself a piHat. Order one online. Get it from Commodore Forever. It's a great one. Get it from somebody else. I'm sure they're fine. And it'll work absolutely fine for you. Understand that it's going to work as a 1541 or as a slow speed 1581. Understand you have to use the utilities that are included with the pi1541, and you can't use any of the other cool utilities like the SD browsers and the draw copies, the two versions I talked about a few weeks ago. They're not going to work. They're not going to work properly. I would say if it's your only sole device, you don't have any actual physical 1541s or 1571s, it's beautiful. Set it up as Drive 8. You're never going to complain. You're never going to see any of these issues I'm talking about. But If you're using it with a real drive, a real 1541, a real 1571, a real 1581, and you want to use them all together, and you want to maybe be able to migrate these files onto real floppies, because there are actual legitimate reasons for doing that, then I would say look at an SD2IEC. I think it's a well-rounded product. You can think of it as a hard drive for your Commodore 64 or your Commodore 128. It works with most D64 and D81 files. There are always some that don't work. It also works with D.7 or .D71, which is nice. But for the price, you're talking $45 versus dropping 110, 120. I think it might be a better deal to look at the SD2IEC in the overall scheme of things. That's just my opinion, and I'm sure in the comments below somebody's going to tear me a new one and telling me how wrong I am and tell me how wonderful the pi1541 is. And it is wonderful. So while you guys are busy flaming me in the comments down there about me telling you that the SD2IEC is probably a better product, I'm going to play some of this Pac-Man game that I've never played before. See what that's like. So until next time, oh, that was fast. So until next time, this is Doug from the ChickenHead Chronicles, signing out. I have no idea what I'm doing in this game.